My guest tonight revolutionized women's tennis, forcing her competitors to train and play the game her way. Raised in communist Czechoslovakia, Martina Navratilova burst onto the world tennis scene at the age of 13 and would go on to become one of the game's greatest players. She was ranked #1 in the world for 332 weeks, has a record 31 Grand Slam doubles titles, and her 18 Grand Slam singles titles sit third all-time in the history of women's tennis. But before she was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame, did you know she was named after a ski resort, wrote 3 mystery novels, and was a citizen of no country for over 5 years? Tonight we'll learn what makes this undeniable icon who she is. A woman who once said, "The only thing you regret in life is the thing you didn't do." Please welcome American and Czech tennis legend Martina Navratilova. I'm going in for the hug.
Thanks, guys. I feel like I'm in a theater or something.
I mean, first of all,
Hey.
best shoes that we've had on a guest, period.
Oh, thank you for that. I usually don't get compliments for my shoes, but I'll take it.
Okay, I mean, that's, those are not your typical, you know, Foot Locker deals.
They're comfortable.
They're comfortable.
I could run in them.
You could?
Yeah.
I can't run in anything. We have done over 40 of these interviews, and I don't believe that a more courageous person has ever sat in that seat.
You can't measure that, but thank you anyway.
Yeah.
It's all relative.
First of all, your last name changed early on in your life,
Right.
Navratilova. You were born Martina
Schubertova.
Schubertova.
Yeah, like Schubertova, yeah.
Schubertova.
Like the composer Schubert,
Right.
with an OVA, because that's for women. In Czech Republic, OVA is for women, so that's how you know it's a woman.
So they put a suffix on there at the end of the last name to say that's the
Well,
woman.
my father was Schubert, I'm Schubertova. And then when I changed my name to my stepfather, his name was Navratil, so I'm Navratilova. That's why all the Slavic players have OVA at the end of the name, see? It's not, that's what it is.
Getting a lot of out in this audience. Born in Prague,
Yes.
Czechoslovakia, at a really intense time in your country's history.
Right.
And really your family dynamic is really intense and hard to wrap your head around for somebody who's just understanding your story. You were named after the ski resort where your parents worked. Tell me that's accurate.
That's where I was conceived.
That's where you were conceived.
Yes. And in fact, my mom, when I went back, my mom showed me the room where it happened.
Really?
I really didn't need to know that, but...
Right. I mean, did you feel anything special when you walked in there?
It was just cool to be there, because I've seen photos of that lodge, because I grew up, the first 3 or 4 years of my life, I lived in a lodge maybe, I don't know, a mile down the mountain.
Right.
But that's where I was conceived, so I always knew the name, and I've had photos of my parents in front of the lodge and my grandparents. But then I kind of just put things into context. Yeah.
Your mom, Jana, was a skier, was a tennis player, like your grandmother was. I mean, so while tennis gets introduced to you at a relatively young age, I mean, there was obviously athletic genes in you, and specifically tennis, which I think is really cool.
Well, I had no choice, really. I mean, my mom skied with me when she was like 8 months pregnant. So it was in my blood before I even came out of the womb. And in fact, I've been skiing. We have that ski tracks, and I went about 60 miles an hour on the skis, and I really wasn't going full speed yet. So skiing is my second best sport, and I actually skied before I played tennis.
I know your mom and dad got divorced early. You were 3, 4 years old.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons why, was because of his temper, correct?
A bit mercurial and not dependable. He would rather be with his buddies than take care of the family. But great guy. And actually, my fathers knew each other before either one knew my mom. It's a small country. But they were both skiing. They were skiing buddies. And then anyway, so that's it was kind of cross cross-pollination
Yeah.
of sorts.
Almost literally.
But yeah, we moved. My mom divorced. I was about 4 years old. We left the mountain lodge that we lived in and moved to my hometown where my grandparents lived. And that's where I grew up. That's where I spent all of my childhood.
And this man named Mirek becomes your stepfather and your coach. And at the age of 4, you used, I believe, your grandma's wooden racket.
My grandmother was a player also, and I got my grandmother's racket to play against the wall. Kind of in the corner of the club, there was a wall, and the racket was too big for me, with a wooden handle. I mean, it's the old-fashioned. You don't see them anymore. My dad says, okay, you just go play on the wall, and when you can hit a forehand with one hand, then I'll help you. So I hit for 2 years against the wall by myself, pretending I was Rod Laver and Billie Jean King, and had a great time. And my dad was very critical, but positive. I mean, he was always encouraging. Maybe 5 times I hit a ball where he had nothing to say. It was always something. And my sister would just get fed up and just throw the racket on the court and walk out. And I was so admiring of her because I couldn't do that. I was going to stay there until I got it right, until I hit that perfect shot, and then we could quit.
Is it just hindsight? Is it easy for us or anybody to say, well, Mirek or somebody saw something different in you as you're pounding this tennis ball against the wall that, oh my God, she's really got something here?
Well, he knew I was a good athlete. I mean, things came naturally to me. I worked at it, but it came also naturally. And I did all kinds of sports. I skated in the winter. We swam in the river in the summer. So I played hockey in the winter on my figure skates, and rode my bicycle everywhere. Just always pushing myself.
I guess that was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Where does that competitive drive come from? Is that something that was taught to you, or was that just you naturally?
That was me. Yeah, I didn't have any choice. Both my parents were very athletic. That was one good thing, I think, about the only good thing about growing up in a communist country, that girls were encouraged to be athletes. There was no, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. It's too hard for you. Sports are for boys. Never got that part.
I read where you would even race around the house and time it, and then try to beat your time the next day or later.
Yeah, I just timed myself. I was, and when you say about a guy, oh, he's so competitive, it's a plus. When you say that about a woman, it's like, oh, she's so competitive. Like, it's not as much of a plus as it is for men. But for me, I say, okay, I'm competitive. What's the option? Not be competitive? Whoever goes on the court say, oh, I want to lose today. Yeah, that's why, right? It's crazy. It's crazy that.
At some point, Mirek, your father, stepfather, we'll just call him your dad, says you're going to win Wimbledon someday. Did you believe him? Did that make any sense to you?
Well, yes, I believed him, but I didn't realize how big the world was. I didn't really know what that meant in terms of everybody else in the world. But it was a dream. But I don't know. We just kept going after it. I mean, I wanted to win since I saw it first on TV. We had this little TV with black and white. The only reason you knew where the ball was because the people were there. It was so small that you just followed the action, watching the people run around. But I just fell in love with the place, the whole atmosphere, and I still remember trying to see if I could see the grass coming over the people's shoes.
Right.
Of course, you couldn't see it. But that was a dream since about 8 or 9 years old. I saw Rod Laver play in Prague around the same time, and I said, I want to be just like him.
In 1965, you're 9 years old, and you get taken to see this Coach Parma. Mm-hmm. Coach Parma, who was in charge of this indoor court, and it was cold, I know, in the winter. So if you were good enough and you could prove that you were worthwhile, you could get time on that indoor court and get instruction from Coach Parma.
Exactly. I had a tryout with him. The woman that managed these courts also had a place in our hometown, and she saw me play, and she thought I had talent, and she gave me an audition with George Parma, and I didn't know that's what it was. And my dad certainly couldn't afford to pay him what he was charging back then, but he took me on. We had an audition, and he said, okay, I'll take her on for free. So once a week, I'd get an hour lesson with him in the summer, in the winter on the indoor courts, and in the summer I went to his club, and so once a week for an hour for 3 years. And my dad basically learned everything about tennis from him. And then the Russians came in '68, so George Parma left Czechoslovakia.
But Parma had told you before he left that tennis is what could allow you to see the world.
You couldn't leave the country. Most of the time, people were denied. And but if you were a top athlete, and you were good enough to go and compete, then you would automatically get the visa from the sports federation. So it was a kind of a ticket to travel the world and hopefully compete.
Interesting time in your home country because they're trying a mix of communism and democracy. This is what it looked like for Martina.
The Czechoslovak experiment, the most daring attempt to marry communism with democracy, had failed. Czechoslovakia's kidnapped leaders decided resistance was hopeless. In a tragic broadcast, Dubček broke the news.
Prosím vás, nedopusťte provokácie. Nedovolte vniesť paniku do našich hradov. Nezostáva nám v ťažkej situácii.
Wow, I've never seen that footage. Jesus. They didn't show that on TV.
So that's
They wouldn't
the
have
first time
never,
you've seen something.
First time I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen photos, but I've never seen footage. Yeah, they wouldn't have showed that then. The army was ordered to stand down, so which was a good thing because it would have gotten slaughtered. You know, the Russians came in. They said there were 25,000 people against the government that were like provocateurs, you know, causing trouble. So they brought in 600,000 soldiers for 25,000 people. Yeah, you figure out the math, right? Like 20 soldiers to one person, which was total baloney, obviously. And yeah, so it got squished very quickly. So August 21st, 68.
The country becomes communist,
Right.
and what was this beautiful home with fruit trees and this big sprawling estate, your family is now sharing with other people. Can you just, I don't know that any of us who haven't lived in a totalitarian state can understand what that's like. And these are your earliest impressions in life.
Well, it was just this sense of loss for the whole country, for all the people that were ruled by a communist country, which then by a communist party that was ruled by the Soviets. And we really had no choices. We had no freedom of expression, or if you told the wrong joke, you know, you may be sent off to, kicked out of school or kicked out of your work, downgraded, or worse yet, even put in jail for speaking your mind. So I learned very early on to censor myself and be careful what I say to whom.
All right, what are your goals for tennis as you're in your mid-teens?
Well, I wanted to win Wimbledon, and maybe later wanted to be #1, but Wimbledon was the big thing, not to be #1, because there really was no ranking system actually back then. So it was, I knew that tennis was my way out of the country, but that was not the driving force. I really loved the sport, always loved the sport, you know. There was never a day where I didn't want to play. As Billie Jean King said, you know, I've never seen the ball come over the net the same way twice. There's always something different about each moment. So it keeps you coming back.
Your home country sends you to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the deal is whatever you win, you have to bring that cash
Bring it
home
back, yeah.
and give it to the government.
Yep. My dad was making, at that point, maybe $100 a month in Czech money, which was good enough to, you know, still pay the bills and whatever, but not that much money, obviously. We got $11 a day per diem that first year, $13 in New York, because they knew New York was more expensive. And I still managed to save money. I would come back with like 300 crowns, which was so much money. You know, after 2 months, I saved $300. And that was, you know, my 3 months' worth of salary from my dad.
So you're coming back with
But
lumps
I mean,
in your pants.
I would give, the federation would get maybe $10,000, and I'd get to keep maybe 500. I mean, they didn't give me any part of the prize money. I just, you know, saved money from the per diem, ate at the club, or ate at the housing, and did the pro-ams.
March 22nd of 1973, you play a young lady who's 2 years older than you by the name of Chris Evert in Akron, Ohio. That is the first of roughly how many meetings between you and Chris Evert?
We played 80 times.
80 times.
We played 80 times. The greatest, yeah. That was a lot of tennis. 80 times. Most of those matches were in the finals, and one of us was #1, the other one was #2.
Yeah.
So yeah, the greatest rivalry ever in the sport.
And yet, I know that the relationship started out so strong because it just feels like, and maybe I'm wrong, tell me, but she had a welcoming presence for you.
Yes.
She was somebody that you looked up to.
Yes.
And she really kind of, in essence, put her arm around you and said, you know, welcome.
She did. It was Chris and Billie Jean King that really were my best friends the first few years on the tour. But I figured I was on my way because the very first time I played Chris in that tournament in Akron, and the week before I played Ivan Gulagong. I lost to Ivan 6-3, 6-4. And when I lost to Chris in Akron, I lost to a 6-3, 7-6. Close match. I actually had a set point. And I'm like, if I can play that close the first time I play them, I know I'll get better. In
spring of '74 in Orlando, you win your first singles title. I read where you hugged a light pole.
Yeah.
And it's, you know,
sounds weird.
It sounds weird, and it makes people laugh a little bit, but it's profoundly sad to me because you didn't really have anybody to hug.
I was, yeah, that's the pole. I was right next to the umpire's chair, and, you know, I wasn't going to hug the umpire. Yeah, I won the tournament. I was the Virginia Slims of Orlando and won $10,000, which went to the federation. But I was just so happy. I wanted to hug somebody, and I was looking, and everybody was sitting down. I think if somebody was there standing up, I would have hugged them, even told a stranger, but there was nobody near me, so I just hugged the pole.
How does that make you feel?
Well, sad, because I was alone then, because there were no other players. Some tournaments, there would be other Czech players, but most of the time I was by myself. And then when I finally started making it, I could have had my parents travel with me. I had the money for it, but they were not allowed to leave. So I was still alone.
I want to go through.
I had a tough life, Jesus. No, I mean, seriously, I don't mean to be glib, but I didn't realize how alone I was even when I wasn't alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. At some point, you make the decision to defect. And I can't imagine what that process is like. Mentally, emotionally, to leave everyone behind.
Right.
Can you describe to somebody who's never been through something like that, what that process and what clicks where you go, okay, that's it?
Well, it's hard to imagine that now because we're so far removed from it that it's almost hard to think that that's how it used to be, but that this is what it was, and we didn't know any different. So again, you have to get the visa to get out of the country. And actually in '75, I played Wimbledon, and my family came. The whole family was out of the country at the same time. We could have defected then. Looking back, I think I wish we had, because we would have had the family together. Because it was after that, when I got back that summer, that the federation said, we're not going to let you go play the US Open, which is 2 months later. And I thought, well, if they don't let me, I don't have a choice. If you don't get the visa, you don't go. You can't go against the federation's wishes. So finally, a week before, they said, okay, we'll let you go. Jan Kodeš, who was the top Czech tennis player and a good friend, talked to the federation and said, please let her go. She's one of the top players in the world. You have to let her go. So they did, and it was at that time, at that moment, that I knew I wouldn't come back, because I couldn't live with not knowing if I get to go out again.
But you know the other side of it,
yeah.
Which is once you make that decision,
it's a one-way ticket.
There's no going back.
Right.
And once you make that decision, your mom and dad are left behind.
Right.
Did you tell your mom when you left
No.
for the US Open you were going to defect?
No, and that's just when I always cry, but I'm not going to cry this time because it's a very long interview. But I knew I wasn't going to go back. I talked to my dad, and he said, if you don't come back, when you call, don't tell your mom. And when you call us, don't believe us if we say come back, because they're making us say that. So it was kind of planned ahead, but I wasn't 100% sure I would do it, but like 99 when I left. But if I knew 100%, I don't know if I would have had the guts to do it. But it was kind of easier 3 weeks later to just say I can't deal with this. But it still obviously was very difficult, and broke my mom's heart.
Did it, I guess, feel like kind of a betrayal that you weren't totally honest with her?
No.
Why does it make you that emotional, other than the obvious reasons when you say it broke your mom's heart because you were just leaving her behind?
I wasn't gonna cry. You do this to everybody, though, don't you? I'm gonna call you Barbara Walters from now on.
Just refer to me as Barbara.
Walters.
Barbara Buck.
Barbara Walters, I don't think she made me cry as much as you are making me cry.
We don't have to get emotional if you don't want to. I can't imagine how distracted you were at the 75 U.S. Open. I mean, how do you, and you're going to face Chris Evert.
Right.
How in the world do you physically perform when you're, you know, emotionally just chained up?
I wasn't thinking about it during the match, so it wasn't anything, you know, on the back of my mind that much. I just wanted to do as well as possible. But by then, the U.S. Open was played on clay, and Chris was the queen of clay, so she wiped me off the court. And then I think it was either that day or the next day that I went to the INS office in Manhattan.
And you declare that you are defecting.
They said, come after hours, because we don't want anybody to see Martina here, because we want to keep it quiet. And the next morning, the phone rings at like 8 o'clock, and I answer. I was sound asleep because I had a late night. And it's Vera. She says, why did you do it? I said, did what? I had no idea what she was talking about. And she says, why did you do it? And I'm like, oh my God, she knows. How do you know? She said, well, it's in the Washington Post. And then all hell broke loose. And you know, again, now I'm really alone because I can't really talk to my coach. I had to kind of be spirited away.
So I guess the comment that came out of Czechoslovakia was, and this is kind of like yeah, no kidding, was that, well, she just wants to be a pro and she wants a fat bank account.
Yep. That was what
their
they
summary.
said. I betrayed my motherland and wasn't grateful enough for what it had given me, and I just went after the money. Yeah, it was all about money for me, and I was never gonna amount to anything because I was so greedy. I was a greedy capitalist now. So yeah, they were right.
Can you describe what it was like your first time in America?
I loved America. The first time I stepped foot in Fort Lauderdale was the first tournament I ever played. Loved it. Everything about it, the palm trees and the fat ham sandwiches and the cars. And you don't understand. In Czechoslovakia, you had a ham sandwich that was a big slab of bread and one little slice of ham. And here you have, you know, 2 thin slices of bread and like this much ham. It was total heaven. So I fell in love with the country from the get-go. Billie Jean called me a Yankee right away. Yeah, that was her nickname for me. So it was automatic that I would live here. Loved everything about the country. Most of the tournaments were played here. And, you know, I just felt at home.
You bought a Mercedes, I read, where your vanity plate said X-Czech.
X-Czech 450 SL.
That's a big that's a big middle finger back home.
Well, I didn't mean it that way, but happy to be here.
But at this time, in this kind of in-between time, you're a citizen really of nowhere.
I wasn't. No.
And that's why when you see the picture of you hugging the light pole because you have no one to hug, or now your family's back home and your dad's telling you no matter what you hear when you call back here, don't come home.
Come back.
And you're here and you're alone.
Right.
I don't know how you could describe what that's like to feel like you have no home country.
You just don't think about it. You just ignore it, you know. Tennis players have very good short-term memory because you have to forget the bad shot you hit because, you know, 5 seconds later you're hitting another ball. So it was just about the tennis, and I had good base here. I had good friends, kind of my chosen family. But of course it wasn't the same, but you just don't think about it. It is what it is. There was no other option, so you just get on with it.
You mentioned the thick ham sandwiches.
Yeah.
And I know that at that point in your life, let's say training was not #1 yet in your life.
I was in very good shape. And then when I first came here, my metabolism changed. I played Fort Lauderdale. Second tournament was Dallas. I had to buy a new pair of shorts because everything tasted so good here. I just ate too much. I played tennis for 3 hours a day, and I put on 20 pounds in 2 weeks. That's like impossible. Not eating any junk food. I mean, I would have ice cream, you know, because the ice cream was delicious.
Right.
But I just ate too much of a good thing. So I still remember those shorts. They were really cute shorts, but I got them in the pro shop where we played the tournament. And they were white with blue pocket, a red pocket, and a yellow waistband. They were really cute.
So let's get to the 76 Wimbledon effort against Chris Evert.
Looking back, I really didn't know what I was doing. Technically, I was okay, but tactically, I wasn't fluent at all, and just played by kind of the seat of my pants. And I had a lousy backhand and a much better forehand, so I assumed everybody else was too. So I would hit to Chris's backhand. It was her best shot.
Right.
I would hit to Ivan Gulagong's backhand because it was a better shot for her, but I just assumed everybody had a lousy backhand because I had a lousy backhand. I didn't have a coach. Nobody told me, oh, you need to go to the forehand. So I was without a coach for 6 years. I didn't know any better. My dad was my coach. I leave my country. I don't get a coach. It was if I have a regret, it's that I didn't get a coach, but I didn't know.
At some point, you meet Sandra Haney, who was a top-ranked golfer, and things started to change for you in that regard.
Well, she helped me with my head. She, because as you could see, I was very emotional, and she said, you know, when you lose a match because you're upset, you're only beating yourself. No, I didn't have any help from anybody on the mental. And that's when I realized, oh, she's right. Nobody knows I got a bad line call or I missed an easy shot, and that's why I got upset and I lost. I just lost. So that's when I started becoming a little better mentally, controlling my emotions and channeling them the right way.
Let's jump into the 1978 season in Wimbledon.
Mm-hmm.
And now, you know, this career's been building to this point. Tell me how you are preparing for that Wimbledon.
Well, first of all, I lost those 20 pounds that I put on in 73. Then in 76, I did this training, really heavy-duty training in Montreal. Billie Jean King and a couple other friends, we went for this 2-week training period. And I really haven't done anything intensive. And I lost 5% body fat.
In 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks, I was down to 16%. And guess how much weight I lost? 2 pounds. I lost 2 pounds.
Muscles heavier.
5%, exactly, 5% body fat.
It's so interesting to think that in this 78 Wimbledon, in the final, you're meeting Chris Evert.
So I played Chris, and it was my first Wimbledon final. She'd won twice already, 74
When you walked
and
out
76.
onto center court, what was the sense? What was the feeling? Like, what was the crowd? Did you get an idea of who the crowd was for?
Oh, yes, they weren't. We were both bad guys that tournament because Chris had beaten Virginia Wade, who won the year before, who was British, defending champion. Chris beat her in the semifinals, so she's the bad guy. And I beat Ivan Gulagong in the other semifinals, who was the darling of Wimbledon, so I was the other bad guy. So they were kind of like, they didn't really care when we were there. They just appreciated the tennis.
Well played. Oh, she's put it in the net. That's it. That's it. And a truly wonderful victory for Martina. And one feels sure that this is the first of many victories. She was promising at 16. She's the champion at 21.
Yeah, so, I mean, you saw, you know, we were friends, and she was happy for me.
Yeah, that was a genuine, like,
she was
hey, happy for you.
She knew what it felt like, because she'd won it twice already, 74 and 76. And for me, it was very bittersweet, because, again, my family wasn't there. I didn't even know if they could see the match. My father somehow called me about 2 hours later. I had a phone call in the locker room, and it's my father on the phone, which I have, to this day, I don't know how he got the number, how he got connected, because to make an international phone call was a procedure. So I found out then that they watched the match, because they drove to Pilsen, again, that town close to West Germany, and I watched it on TV there. That's
what was
I found
said?
out that they
I mean,
watched.
I can't imagine what that conversation was like.
They were just happy. I think they'd been drinking by that point, so... Yeah, they were very happy. But
how did Martina feel about winning the
ecstatic
Wimbledon
and sad that I couldn't be with my family, because this is what we dreamt about for so many years.
You win in 78, and then 79 rolls around, and you're right back in the same situation in the final against Chris Evert. And did you know your mother was coming to Wimbledon in 1979?
The Duchess of Kent kind of intervened and convinced the Czech government to give my mom a visa. So that was the first time I saw her in 4 years, was at Wimbledon. To this day, I don't know how I put one foot in front of the other. So, yeah.
When you saw her, did you have to come to her?
I went to the airport, and I don't know. Again, I don't know how I managed to play, but it was just, we were so thrilled that it was a positive. You know, you kind of forget the years that had gone by, and just so happy that we were actually together, because we didn't know if we would ever see each other again, you know? So it was an escape in a way, and then I played even better. And the funny thing was that playing Chris again, they were cheering for her a lot more than for me, but I still managed to win. So
yeah, and by the end of that '79 year, you're ranked #1 in the world. But how do you keep that fire lit?
I loved the sport. It was that simple. I wanted to be a better tennis player. You know, there was still some that I knew I still didn't reach my peak. I could still get better, and I was 22, 23. It's like my career is ahead of me. So you didn't think in those long terms and, oh, I'm #1, I can relax now. You just wanted to keep playing. I love the sport. That's why I played doubles every tournament. And maybe that's the record that I'm proud of the most of the records that I hold is I won singles and doubles in the same tournament 80 times. 80 tournaments.
God.
So that's a lot of tennis, but it just didn't occur to me not to play doubles because I had so much fun.
So you get the thrill of seeing your mother at Wimbledon in '79, and then not long thereafter, at some point, your dad, your sister, and your mom show up in the United States.
Right. They got an immigration visa, so they basically gave up the house that they lived in and sold everything and came to live with me. And
was this okayed by you, by the way?
Yeah, of course, of course. But it was difficult. I lived in Dallas. Now I'm 24 years old, and I'm in a gay relationship which they didn't know about. I wasn't going to tell them unless they asked. If they asked, I would tell them, but they didn't ask, so I didn't say anything. And of course, this is 1980, so you can imagine this definitely wasn't something that you talked about. And finally, my dad asked me, we think that you and Rita may live together as man and woman. I said, well, yes, we do. And then all hell broke loose. So it was pretty rough. We had a big argument, and my dad said some things that I think he wishes he hadn't said. And it was pretty difficult, but, you know, it was what it was. And it was about 3 months after that, they decided to go back to Czechoslovakia.
Did any of that affect your tennis?
Tennis was my kind of a, what do you call it, a safe place for me. When things were going really well, or if I was in a new relationship, I was in love, I wanted to show off to my girlfriend how well I'm playing. And if things were bad, it was my...
sanctuary.
Sanctuary. Thank you for the word. I couldn't think of it. I was able to get away from everything and lose myself in my sport. So either way, tennis was a savior for me, whether things were going great or indifferent or bad. So I could still play tennis. No matter what, I could still play tennis. So that kind of saved me.
In 1981, you lose to Chris Evert 6-0, 6-0 at the Women's Tennis Association Championship. What is that like, losing double bagel to your good friend?
I really have to tell you that I didn't sleep much that night, the night before the match. And it wasn't because I had to play a match. I started a new relationship, and yeah, I had a really good time. So
you're a little tired.
I finally... that's not to say...
I think you're blushing, actually.
I am.
Right now.
That's not to say I would have lost to Chris, but I think I would have won a game or two if I had had more sleep that night. But then a year later, I beat Chris 0-2 that same tournament. But that was the only time I was ever double-bageled as a pro. So yeah, it happened to me a lot as a junior.
Right.
0-0, but I never lost the pros. Yeah, if I could do that over again, I would have waited one more day. To start that relationship.
This basketball star, Nancy Lieberman, comes into your life.
Yeah.
And really takes your training regimen to new levels. Tell me about that.
It was that we started sometime in the spring, and she came to Europe with me, and I lost semifinals, I think, at the French, and 3 tournaments in a row on grass. I lost to Chris in the semifinals. This is '81, and she said, "How much longer are you gonna play tennis?" I'm like, "Oh, till I'm about 30." She said, "Okay, you got 4 more years. What are you doing now?" I said, "What are you talking about?" She says, "You're wasting your talent. You're not working hard enough." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Well, basketball training is much more tough than anything that we were doing on a tennis court. And so I started running suicides with Nancy on the basketball court and playing basketball. We started running track, lifting weights that summer. And I started really finally getting in shape. And then during the US Open that summer, Dr. Renee Richards started helping me completely by accident. I was playing a match and I didn't have anybody to hit with. Renee was there. I was like, "Renee, can you hit with me?" So she does. And then she started saying a little bit about my technique. And I got to the finals of the Open, but after that I said, "Renee, would you be my coach? Because I don't have a coach, and maybe you could help me." Maybe you could help me. And she took me up, and that's when really I started dominating the sport, because I had a coach and I was training hard, and so I had all the bases covered, and really started understanding the sport.
For someone like Nancy Lieberman or Renee, was your relationship, your closeness with Chris Evert seen as a detriment?
Oh, yeah. First off, it's different for everybody. Some people play better when there is an adversarial feeling to it, when they really don't like the other person, they play better. Some people play worse. I play better when I play against friends than against people I don't like. Thankfully, there weren't that many people that I really didn't like on the tour. They were all pretty nice, so I didn't have an issue, but I played much better against people that I liked. But Nancy brought another aspect to it. There's a net between us, but there is a direct conflict, obviously, because, you know, they hit the ball and I hit it back. So there is that one-on-one situation. And Nancy, being a basketball player, team sport, you're nice to your teammates, but you're never nice to your opponents. And you know, there's a lot of trash talking in basketball. There's no such thing in tennis. She didn't want me to trash talk, but she would trash talk Chris, without Chris knowing about it,
right,
and said, you gotta hate your opponent. You can't be nice.
Even if it's fake hate? I mean, how could you hate Chris?
It was something she made me realize she has something that I want. So you gotta stop being nice. Doesn't mean that I'm gonna be nasty. Doesn't mean I'm gonna cheat. But I need to get that killer instinct.
1982, such a good year for you. I mean, you go 90-3. You win the French, and this is kind of the start of what we've been building toward, I think, since you sat down in that chair. But I mean, everything lined up for you at that point. You have a coach, you have fitness, you have drive, you have purpose, and now we're seeing you at your best.
She's going to win it just like that. Martina, a true champion. She fell apart and came back.
A tough test from Chris Evert Lloyd, but hail to the champion, Martina Navratilova.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
I worked so hard in training. I mean, my typical day would be playing tennis from 10 to 2, 4 hours, then maybe an hour break. And then we would go either to the track or play basketball, full court, 2-on-2, for like an hour and a half. And then I would lift weights. That was my day. I worked hard. I worked my ass off. And I knew nobody else was doing it.
That's what I was going to ask you. This is revolutionary because you bring this power game into women's tennis that didn't exist before this.
I mean, I was strong, but I'm 5'8". I'm not overwhelming physically, but I worked hard. And, you know, in the gym, I lifted heavy weights. And it wasn't to get necessarily stronger, but it was to be able to hit the ball just as hard at the end of the match as you do at the beginning of the match.
I mean, I think we should just kind of state what happens in your Wimbledon career. I mean, that was the one that was always out there as the pinnacle. That's what you were told. You won 6 in a row and 9 total?
Yep.
6 in a row, starting in 1982.
It was a good run. It was a good run.
A seriously good run, yeah. I mean, Borg won 5 in a row?
Yeah, and then he lost to McEnroe.
And then he lost to McEnroe, and you're reeling off 6 in a row, 9 overall. I mean, this is a sustained level of excellence that had not been seen.
Well, I was lucky in that I had great support. I had really good DNA. I mean, my body is lined up just right, so I really didn't have any injuries. My two knees, I did have scope on my knees actually in 1990, but overall very injury-free and a great support system.
Are you pulling other people fitness-wise with you? Do they now have to keep up with you?
They knew they needed to do more. I think Ivan Lendl, when he realized what it did for me, he started training hard. And Chris also knew that if she wanted to catch up and beat me again, she would have to start doing more than just playing tennis, because I beat her 13 times in a row at one point.
These are rivalries that I don't know that they exist anymore to that degree, right? I mean, it seems like in men's tennis, this was the golden age on both sides.
It's not happening on the women's side as much. You don't have the rivalries because they're just not consistent enough. And you know, the guys were more unpredictable. You didn't know who was going to be in the finals, but it was always Chris and myself. And nowadays usually it's Serena Williams and somebody.
Right.
But they're just most of the top players, they don't get there. We were very consistent, and you know, just tried very hard every single tournament. We played a lot of tennis.
1984 to 1986, you have an amazing run.
I had a streak of 74 matches in a row. I had a streak in 3 years. I lost 6 matches in 3 years, total. Like 82, 83, 84. That was an outstanding run. And I think maybe what I'm proud of the most is how much I played. I played, you know, 16 to 18 tournaments every year. I pulled out of, I think, 3 tournaments my whole life.
Isn't that a great thing to be able to say? You know, I guess no matter what you do for a living, I always showed up. And you always showed up ready.
What somebody says, what is it? You can't win without showing up. But yeah, we prided ourselves on putting it on the line and supporting the tour, because we were still in the beginning of stages in the 70s of getting established as a serious professional sport, and the women were doing it on their own, and we had to show up because women are judged differently than men, you know, and if we failed, then the whole tour fails. So we kind of had the whole tour on our shoulders. Billie Jean started it, and then Chris Evert and I kind of carried the torch forward, and Pam Shriver and you know, the players that came after. Now Venus Williams has been a great ambassador for the sport, very involved outside of off the court, and you know, we had to perform.
At some point here, you run into a young lady who I believe at the time was 17, named Steffi Graf. That was in '87 in Wimbledon, and you're 31 at the time.
Yep, almost.
Could you sense at that time what was standing on the other side of the court, how good she was?
Yeah, you could see she was going to be great from the very beginning. She had great legs. I mean, she was running like world times in the quarter mile. She was fast, she was quick, and very strong head, and a great game. Great serve, big forehand, slice backhand. That was really hard to do anything with, and so it was always a challenge. But yeah, you could see it coming. And coming into the finals, coming into the Wimbledon match, she hadn't lost a match all year. She won every single tournament she played, and I hadn't won a tournament.
Let's take a look.
Six in a row for Navratilova.
Navratilova wins by 2 sets to none. 7-5, 6-3.
I think she was the most fun player for me to play against.
Really?
Because I think we were the best athletes to play against each other. And it was kind of a cat and mouse game. And, you know, you had to play your best to beat her. So to beat her in that final was one of the best matches that I ever played, just mentally, because she had such a hot streak, beat me at the French Open final. And I hadn't won a tournament leading into the Wimbledon. So my confidence was at 0, and I still managed to win that. So that was perhaps one of the best wins ever.
The last we heard about your family, they were headed back to Czechoslovakia. Did that ever rectify itself? Did you ever have a moment with your dad? Did you ever have a moment with your mom, or, you know, where it was we can just kind of
Yes.
relax.
Well, my dad, I mean, again, Czechoslovakia, gay people were, you know, put into insane asylum. Men, women were kind of discounted. So it was definitely a bad thing to be that. So when my dad found out, for a couple of years we had a tough relationship. But he educated himself. He read books about it, and you know, came to me without me saying anything. He says, you know, I realized it's nothing to do with me, nothing to do with you. This is who you are, and I just want you to be happy. So he educated himself, and you know, was very open-minded, and
He bridged that gap.
he bridged that gap completely. And my mom was okay at the beginning, and then she just wasn't happy with maybe some of the choices I made in my relationship. So she was more critical of the people that I was with, but then she was fine. They just want, bottom line, they wanted me to be happy. So we never did not talk, but there was definitely tension with my dad. With my mom, it was always pretty cool.
Have you found happiness?
Yes, absolutely. Been married, been with the same woman now for almost 9 years. And, yeah. She's beautiful on the inside, beautiful on the outside, and has 2 children, 2 girls. They're now 15 and 11. We got married 2 years ago. It's been great because now I feel like, you know, you can't mess with my family. The legal protection that you get when you get married is cannot be underestimated, and it was automatic for straight couples, and now we can get it too, and it's just amazing how much safer we feel as a family, and from a practical standpoint, it's you know, it's amazing. Now we travel together, and says, "What's your relationship?" I say, "My wife or my daughter," and that's that. You know, you don't have to explain.
In 2000, you go into the International Tennis Hall of Fame. So the obvious thought would be, well, then she's finished, right? I mean, she's a Hall of Famer. You
Right.
get out of the sport, you become a Hall of Famer. 2006 U.S. Open mixed doubles. You've come back. This is 6 years
Played
later.
for 6 years, yeah.
6 years after becoming a Hall of Famer, and you're playing in mixed doubles in 2006. Can you set that up?
What happened was 94, when I finished playing, I'm like, I don't need to hit another tennis ball the rest of my life. I'm happy not playing. And in 98, or 99, I'm doing TV, and I'm watching them play doubles. I'm like, I could still play doubles. But that's about the only thought I gave it. And then following March, a friend of mine, Marianne Swart, who was on the tour, didn't have a doubles partner. She says, do you want to play doubles at Wimbledon? I'm like, oh. Okay, I could do that, because I hit with her and I was hitting the ball pretty well. But I still didn't think about, you know, coming back and playing. But I said, well, if we play Wimbledon, then we need to play the week before, because I can't play my first tournament at a Grand Slam after not having played for 6 years. So let's play Eastbourne. But if we lose there early, I need more match play. So French Open. No, I don't want the first tournament to be a major. So the week before, Barcelona. Okay, so we play Barcelona.
French.
Then, oh, actually Madrid. It was in Madrid. Then the French, Eastbourne. We got to the quarterfinals at Wimbledon, lost to the Williams sisters in 3 sets, the only team that took a set from them. And I had so much fun. I'm like, I got to keep playing, because I knew I could play better. I'm 43 years old, but I know I can play better than I'm playing now. That lasted for 6 years. I kept thinking, I can still play better. And finally, in 2006, I'm like, I cannot play any better than I'm playing right now. So I knew that was going to be my last year.
Mixed doubles.
Mixed doubles. Bob Ryan.
You're 49 years old.
Yeah, I was, you know, turned 50 a month later.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically 50.
I got my AARP card. They found me. They find you.
Let's just watch.
This is a historic moment. Will signal the farewell of Martina Navratilova.
And it's unbelievable at 49 years old that she's still winning titles.
Caught the line.
Caught the line. Great move by Martina.
Match point. All those in attendance at Arthur Ashe Stadium, perhaps witnessing the last point in the career of that woman. She will walk away from the game a Grand Slam champion for the 59th time.
Thank you for a great ride. I'll take this memory with me and all of you with me for the rest of my life. Thank you so much for being here and hanging around. Thank you. Almost want to say what.
Wow.
Yeah. It was, the funny part was how calm I was all day. We played after some match, I think the night match. We didn't go on the court till about 10 o'clock at night, so I had all day to think about it. And those years when I played, I would get very nervous playing because I just wanted it so badly. It was so much fun. And I knew this was my last match, and I was cool as a cucumber. I just knew I was going to play well, and if we lose, it's okay. If we win, great. But I knew I was going to play well. And of course, I played with Bob Bryan, you know, one of the greatest players ever. So that last game when he served for it, I didn't even have to be on the court. He just served 4 big serves and match over. So that was pretty cool.
59 Grand Slam titles. Wow. I mean, what a body of work. Are you able to wrap your head around that?
I don't think about it that much, but you know, the numbers are pretty overwhelming. Yeah, I did pretty well, I must say. Pat myself on the back.
That's what this show's about. Pat yourself. We have these quotes on the wall. Yours is, "The only thing you regret in life is the thing you didn't do." What does that quote mean to you?
Well, it just means nothing venture, nothing gain. You know, I always wanted to learn new things and take chances and experience new stuff, and you can always go back to how you were doing before.
You've written 6 books.
I did.
And 3 mystery novels.
Yeah, that was fun.
I mean, you're prolific. You're making, you know, you're writing, you're winning, you're
a little bit of this, a little bit of
skiing,
that.
you're playing basketball, you're squeezing the most out of life.
Yeah, actually, I did some woodworking when I retired. Built a couple tables. I got a pilot's license, which was very cool.
Wow.
That was one of the most empowering things actually you can do is flying solo. Terrifying, but so empowering. So yeah, I did that. Like I said, I like experiencing new things. Yeah.
We always end this show with what's next.
What's next? Not a career in politics, although many would like me to do that.
Right,
but
yeah.
Since I can't be president, what's the point?
Right.
Because I definitely wasn't born here. Thank you.
You got 1 vote.
I got some Twitter followers here, I'm sure. I don't know. I really don't know. For now, it's family life. I mean, I work for Tennis Channel, so I do all the majors. I'll be in, you know, doing work for them during the year, and love it. I do speeches around the world on different topics: diversity, women's issues, LGBT issues. Motivational speeches, how to get to the top and stay there, how to stay motivated, all that stuff. Lessons I learned from tennis, how they apply to real life. People tend to listen to athletes because, you know, you can kind of bullshit your way to the top, right? You earn it. You earn it, yeah. I never won a match because I had, you know, a pretty dress or something like that. So, as I said, maybe that's why I went into tennis, because it's such a democratic sport. You really, you know, you either win or you lose, and it's all on you, one way or the other.
All right. Would you rather go without the internet for the rest of your life or without coffee?
Ha! How do you know I'm drinking coffee? I never used to drink coffee, but now I
It's because you're so dehydrated. I've never seen somebody go through water.
Well, I just came from Aspen. So, you know.
So you're
but I
dry.
do drink a lot. Yeah, coffee makes you dehydrated, but I only had like half a cup.
Hey, I'm not judging.
I would rather go without the internet. Yeah.
Wow.
Because I think coffee makes you feel better, and these days the internet makes you feel really lousy.
Great point. Would you rather lose your keys or lose your cell phone?
Cell phone. That can be replaced, you know, but if you don't have your keys, you can't get home.
Would you rather have to say everything that comes into your mind or never be able to speak?
Oh, well, that one's easy.
Everything.
Yeah. Duh.
I kind of feel like you
First
do.
Amendment.
And the last question, what makes a champion tennis player?
What makes a champion? Anything. It's the same old, you know. Champions don't quit until they get it right. You know, they're the first ones in the gym and the last ones to leave. And they're not afraid to fail. Most of all.
I just know that like everybody else in this room right now, one thing we would say about you is you were never afraid. right? I mean, growing up where you grew up, defecting, coming to the United States, changing your training regimen, becoming this great champion, being a champion for so many different causes, and being here to look back with all of us has been a joy. This is a Hall of Fame tennis player. This is a Hall of Fame person. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Martina Navratilova.